What would you do if your father, your king, erased your entire legacy with the stroke of a pen? Not just your name, not just your title, but your children's future, their birthright, gone. That's exactly what Prince Harry is facing right now. And the world? Silent. Because this wasn't some messy public press conference. This wasn't a Netflix documentary. This was done the old royal way. In darkness, in secrecy, behind the stone walls of Buckingham Palace, while the rest of the world slept. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But what really happened? Let's pull back the curtain, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about family. It's about power, betrayal, and the monarchy's most ruthless move since the abdication of Edward VIII. And this time, it's personal. It began with silence. No breaking news alert. No headlines. No grand royal proclamation from the palace balcony. But deep inside a candlelit chamber, far from cameras, far from chaos, King Charles III signed a document that would change the British royal lineage forever. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a message, a warning, and a legacy-altering decision. Because in that moment, Prince Harry was officially and permanently removed from the line of succession. And not just him. His children, Archie and Lilibet, erased, too. 3 names. Gone from the royal tree like they'd never existed. And the most chilling part? No one told them. Not formally. Not privately. Not even as a courtesy. Prince Harry found out the way you're about to, through whispers, through leaks, through a betrayal so cold, it would chill even the most battle-hardened royal aide. And when the realization hit, he didn't cry. He didn't plead. He exploded. Why now? Why in this way? Why in secret? To answer that, we have to go back, not just days or weeks, but years. Years of tension, of distance, of quiet war. Remember the Oprah interview? The Netflix docuseries? The memoir Spare? Each of those was a grenade tossed into the heart of Buckingham Palace. And now, we're seeing the retaliation. But this isn't just a personal feud. This is constitutional, historical, dangerous. The line of succession is the spine of the British monarchy. It determines who leads, who inherits, who is protected, who is watched, groomed, respected. To tamper with it? That's not done lightly. So what drove Charles to act? Was it political pressure? Was it William's influence? Or was it something darker? A fear? A threat? Or perhaps a plan that's been brewing for far longer than anyone realizes? Because here's what they won't tell you. This document wasn't drafted last week. It's been in existence for months, maybe even years, hidden away in a legal vault, marked for activation upon approval. The decision to trigger it? That came after something happened behind closed doors. Something only a few people know. Something Harry is still trying to uncover. And when he does, we may see the royal family ripped apart publicly, in a way not even Princess Diana could have imagined. Let's talk about the kids. Archie, Lilibet, innocent, young, unaware. What does it mean for them to be removed from the royal line? For one, no titles, no protections, no ceremonial roles. But more than that, they've been stripped of a future that was once guaranteed by birth. A future of privilege, yes, but also of identity. They're still royal by blood, but not by law. And here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. The palace didn't send a letter. They didn't issue a phone call. No one explained to them, or their parents, why this was done. That silence. It's not just cold. It's calculated. Because by the time Harry found out, it was already too late. The document had been signed. The line had been redrawn. And his name? Gone. But what if I told you this wasn't just about succession? What if I told you this move was a chess piece? One that clears the board for someone else? Because while Harry, Archie, and Lilibet are being quietly cut out, Prince George is being groomed harder than ever. The heir to the heir, already attending private briefings, already learning protocol, already preparing for the throne. And William? He's never looked more serious, more involved, more king-like. Which raises a critical question. Is William behind this? Was this his way of protecting the crown? Or was it revenge for everything Harry revealed? Because buried beneath the royal smiles and photo ops is a brotherly war that's been simmering since childhood. And it may have finally reached its boiling point. Let's not forget Meghan. Oh, Meghan knew something was coming. But not this. Not like this. Sources say she collapsed when Harry told her. Others say she didn't flinch, that she whispered just one sentence and walked out of the room. We'll get to that in a later chapter. But for now, just know, she's not staying quiet. There are moves being made in Montecito. Phone calls, lawyers, publicists. Because Meghan may have lost a Duchess title, but she hasn't lost her fire. And if the palace thinks this is over, they're in for a war they're not prepared for. So why does this matter, now to you? Because the monarchy isn't just a British issue. It's a global brand. It's soft power. It's diplomacy. And what we're watching is not just a family drama. It's a public institution turning against its own. Today it's Harry. Tomorrow, it could be anyone who dares speak out. Think about it. If being born royal isn't enough to protect you from erasure, then what is? What message does this send to every citizen of the Commonwealth? To every journalist, critic, whistleblower? And what does it mean for the future of the crown? Is this the beginning of a more ruthless, more controlled monarchy? Or the slow unraveling of its very soul? We'll dig into all of that. We'll reveal the names behind the document, the secret intelligence that pushed Charles over the edge, the letter Harry sent after it all broke, the heartbreaking moment Archie asked why his name wasn't in the royal books anymore, and the recording, yes, the recording, that may change everything again. But first, let's go back to that room. That cold, wood-paneled room inside St. James's Palace, where the King of England picked up a pen, stared at a centuries-old lineage chart, and made a decision that would echo through history. He signed the paper. He handed it off. He turned away. And when the ink dried, so did the bond between father and son. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What kind of father signs away his own son's future in the middle of the night? Not with a conversation. Not with a warning. Not even with a moment's hesitation. Just a pen, a royal seal, and a document that hadn't seen daylight in decades. It wasn't just any paper, either. This wasn't a press release. It wasn't a news briefing or a planned adjustment to titles. This was something far more permanent. A sealed royal directive, handcrafted in the language of law, power, and centuries-old precedents. No one outside the palace was meant to see it. And yet here we are. Leaked, explosive, and devastating. Because on that cold December night, King Charles III made history. Not by lifting someone up, but by tearing 3 generations down. It happened at precisely 11:47 p.m. inside the walls of St. James's Palace. Long after the press corps had gone home and the streets of London had gone still, an emergency meeting was called. Only a handful of people were summoned. The Lord Chamberlain, the keeper of the Privy Seal, 2 senior legal advisors, and a palace butler, who would later leak fragments of the moment that changed royal succession forever. The doors were locked, phones confiscated, not a single aide allowed to linger. Charles sat alone at the long mahogany table, its polished surface reflecting flickers of candlelight. No modernity here, no electronics, no email trails, just wax seals, parchment, and 2 centuries of inherited protocol. Why the secrecy? Why the suddenness? Because the stakes weren't just political, they were deeply personal. Charles wasn't signing a law. He was rewriting legacy. His own, his father's, his grandsons, and yes, his sons. But what pushed Charles to this? Sources say it wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a burst of rage or a royal tantrum. It was planned, measured, and absolutely final. Some say the trigger came weeks earlier, after a classified security briefing from MI5. A risk assessment labeled Level 5, internal conflict. That's code for family-related national risk. We'll dive into that full briefing later. But the bullet point that allegedly stood out? Continued association with the Duke of Sussex undermines long-term stability of monarchical succession. Not may undermine. Not potentially. Undermines. To Charles, the message was clear. Harry wasn't just problematic. He was dangerous. To the image of the crown, to the public trust, and worst of all, to the carefully managed transition from Queen Elizabeth to King Charles to Prince William. So, Charles waited. He let the holidays pass. He let the public be distracted. And then, while the world turned its head toward festive lights and royal Christmas speeches, he signed it. Let's talk about the document itself. Its official title? Sovereign Directive on the Clarification and Reordering of Succession in the Interests of Crown Continuity. Sounds harmless, right? That's the trick. Legalese buried in ceremonial politeness. But inside, A quiet nuclear bomb. Paragraph 1 confirms the sovereign's right to recommend alterations to the royal line in exceptional constitutional circumstances. Paragraph 2 invokes a heritage clause last used in 1936, during the abdication of Edward VIII, to remove a royal from the line due to reputational conflict and breach of expected duty. Paragraph 3, that's where it turns icy. With appropriate counsel and in the enduring interests of the Crown and Commonwealth, the following names shall be hereby omitted from the line of royal succession effective immediately and indefinitely. The Duke of Sussex, Master Archie Mountbatten-Windsor, and Miss Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor. No room for ambiguity, no room for appeal, and certainly no mention of reconciliation. Just removal, erasure, as if they never existed in the line at all. Who knew this was coming? Here's the shocking twist. Not even Prince William signed it. Yes, you heard that right. William was informed, but not invited. He was briefed earlier that same day, according to insider reports. The conversation was tense. One source described William's face as ashen. He didn't protest, but he didn't smile, either. That speaks volumes. Because as much as the media frames William as the steely future king, he still carries the bruises of a brotherly bond, once strong, now fractured. And watching your own father erase your sibling? That leaves scars. Still, William gave no statement. No comment. Just silence. But what did he do next? He called someone. Someone who wasn't supposed to know. And that call changed everything. We'll get to that in a moment. But back to Charles. What was his demeanor during the signing? The butler who witnessed it described him as calm, rehearsed, almost surgical. No pause. No hesitation. He simply asked for the folder, adjusted his pen, and signed 3 places. The directive itself, the Privy Council record, and the witness confirmation. Then he folded the document, pressed the royal seal into red wax, and handed it off. That was it. No toasts, no prayers, no hesitation. Just a monarch executing his power with quiet brutality. And then, he rose. He turned away. And he walked out. And now, the question we all want answered. How did Harry find out? Because that's where this story turns from history to heartbreak. It was the next morning. Sources inside Montecito say Harry had just finished a jog near the beach when he saw a missed call from his uncle, Prince Edward. Strange. They hadn't spoken in over a year. When Harry called back, Edward didn't mince words. "You need to sit down," he reportedly said. "There's something you should see. And it's not public, yet." Harry's hands were shaking before the message ended. 30 minutes later, a private courier delivered a copy of the sealed directive to Harry's estate, without a note. No explanation, just the document. And the seal. Harry read the first paragraph aloud to Meghan. By the third, he was pacing. By the fifth, his face was red. By the time he reached the final line, he screamed. No royal guards. No press. Just rage. Exploding through Montecito like a tidal wave. And Meghan? She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She stood, grabbed the document, and walked into another room. Closed the door. What happened next? We'll explore that in Chapter 4. Because what Meghan did next might just change everything again. But back to Harry. He called Charles. He didn't wait. He didn't breathe. He demanded an explanation. That call did not go well. We'll break down the entire explosive phone exchange in Chapter 7. But for now, just know this. Harry was not asking for his titles back. He wasn't even asking to be reinstated. He just wanted to know one thing. Why? And he never got an answer. Because Charles never picked up. He let the Palisades respond. And when the call ended, Harry sat in stunned silence. Because at that moment, the reality settled in. He was no longer a prince in line. He was no longer a father of potential heirs. He was no longer part of the family business. But if you think that's where this ends, think again. Because just 72 hours later, something unexpected happened. A member of Parliament leaked the document to a private journalist. It wasn't supposed to go public, but it did. And the fallout? Monumental. Online outrage. Media firestorms. Political questions. Commonwealth leaders raising eyebrows. And inside the palace? Panic. Damage control. Because now the whole world knew. The king had signed a document in secret that altered the very core of the monarchy. And the person he erased? Was already preparing to fight back. But this wouldn't be in courtrooms. This would be somewhere far more dangerous. somewhere the royals can't control. Because Harry wasn't going to sit quietly. He was going to talk. He was going to write. And, worst of all, he was going to record. And just when it seemed like the walls couldn't close in any tighter, a new name surfaced in the leaked documents. A name that raised even more eyebrows. Camilla. Yes, her signature was there too. Which begs the question, what role did the Queen Consort play in this midnight decision? Was she simply a witness? Or was she the architect? That's what we're diving into next. Because what Camilla said behind closed doors may have pushed Charles toward a decision no monarch has made in nearly a century. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Was this always the plan? Was Prince William quietly, calculatingly, rising behind the scenes, waiting for the moment to strike? Or was he simply pushed into it? Because here's the truth that stunned even royal insiders. When the ink dried on King Charles's secret midnight directive, William didn't object. He didn't protest. He didn't delay it. He didn't even publicly flinch. And that's where the questions begin. The day before the signing, William was called to Sandringham. Not to London. Not to the palace. To the estate where the family used to spend Christmas. A place steeped in memories of Diana, of childhood joy, and of the unspoken tension that's hung over the Wales brothers since Harry's departure. Charles was waiting. No assistants. No staff. Just father and son. Eyewitnesses say William arrived in a gray SUV, dressed down, with no smile. He was seen pacing outside for nearly 10 minutes before finally entering the study. What was said inside remains classified. But we know this much. It was not a consultation. Charles wasn't asking William's permission. He was giving him a preview and a choice. Either support the move, or stand in the way of the monarchy's future. And William? He nodded. Silently. Why would William support this? After all, Harry is his only brother. They grew up inseparable. But here's where it gets complicated and painful. For William, duty always came first. He was born to be king. He was trained from childhood for diplomacy, leadership, sacrifice. Harry, in contrast, was the spare. Free to joke, rebel, even fall. That dynamic worked, until it didn't. Until Harry left. Until Harry told the world their family was racist. That his brother screamed at him. That the royal institution was cold, mechanical, and toxic. And that left William with a decision. Protect his brother, or protect the crown. And in the end, William chose the one thing he was never allowed to walk away from. The monarchy. But was it personal too? Absolutely. Sources close to Kensington Palace say the betrayal of Spare cut deep. William reportedly felt humiliated and stripped bare by Harry's words. Especially the passages about their mother. Especially the claim that William ignored Harry's cries for help. Especially the claim that William's wife, Catherine, was cold and passive-aggressive toward Meghan. That wasn't just storytelling. To William, it was treason. Emotional treason. And when it came time to act, he made no public objection to Charles's decision. Some say that silence spoke volumes. Others say William had been planning this realignment for years, quietly removing Harry from key royal roles, minimizing his visibility, and redirecting press attention toward his own family. It wasn't done with hatred. It was done with strategy. Calculated. Precise. Ruthless. Just like a future king must be. But did William really have influence over the directive? That's the part we're still unraveling. A source from the Privy Council claims William didn't sign the document, but he did review earlier drafts. Let that sink in. Before Harry even knew such a paper existed, William may have read it, edited it, possibly even helped craft its language. This wasn't a last-minute ambush. It was a slow-motion erasure. Designed by the very man who once held Harry's hand at their mother's funeral. And yet, here's the contradiction. William still loves Harry. In private, aides say he often reflects on their childhood, on the laughter, on the bond no public fallout could truly destroy. But love doesn't cancel duty. And in William's world, duty has no room for risk. The British monarchy survives on optics, on order, on continuity. And Harry? He shattered that order. He made the monarchy look weak, flawed, vulnerable. And when you're the next in line to sit on the throne, you don't let vulnerability go unchecked. Then came the next move. William requested a full security briefing on the current royal succession protocol, just hours after Charles's signing. He wanted to know, in precise terms, what the public fallout might be. how to handle international press, how to redirect media attention toward Prince George. This wasn't a reaction. This was strategy. In fact, that same week, Kensington Palace released a carefully curated photo. William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis, standing outside Westminster Abbey, smiling beneath Christmas lights. A picture of stability, of royal unity, of the future. But here's what you weren't told. That photo was taken days earlier and deliberately withheld until after the directive was signed. Timed, staged, weaponized. Because while Harry was pacing the halls of Montecito in a fury, William was claiming the narrative. But is William being manipulated too? Now here's where it gets even more twisted. Some insiders suggest William didn't have as much power as he thought. That Camilla, yes, the Queen Consort, was the one pushing for the document behind the scenes. And that Charles, caught between two worlds, leaned on her guidance more than his heirs. So was William genuinely orchestrating Harry's removal? Or was he being used? A pawn in a much larger chess game. One that aims to eliminate all destabilizing forces before the monarchy passes into his hands? We'll examine Camilla's alleged role in Chapter 3 and 4. But for now, one thing is clear. William didn't stop the document. And in the royal world, silence equals consent. What about his children, George, Charlotte, Louis? This is where the emotional complexity spikes. By removing Harry's children from the line of succession, William's children are now fully secure. No potential challengers. No awkward cousin drama decades down the line. Some royal scholars say this was an essential move to protect the throne's image. That George must grow up without the shadow of an exiled prince's children looming over his reign. But others argue this is a tragedy. A family divided. Cousins, George and Archie, once destined to rule side by side in different roles, now forced into separation before they've even truly met. How do you explain that to a child? How do you look Prince George in the eye and say, "You're the heir, but your cousin, he's been removed"? And how do you explain to Archie that the man who signed off on his erasure once changed his diaper? Because yes, William used to babysit Harry's children. That's the part no one wants to talk about. Behind the crown, there's still blood, still memories, still pain. So why would William allow this? Simple. Because in his mind, Harry chose this path. By leaving the royal family. By writing Spare. By filming Netflix documentaries and doing podcast interviews that made the crown look fragile. William didn't kick Harry out. He just closed the door, locked it, and threw away the key. But the story doesn't end there. Because on the day after the document was signed, William made one last move. A quiet gesture that sent royal watchers into a frenzy. He visited the Queen's private archives. Not for show, not for PR, just for himself. And what did he request? A review of the abdication files of 1936. That's right, the same documents detailing how King Edward VIII was removed from the monarchy for love, scandal, and chaos. Why would William want to see that? Is he studying past mistakes? Is he preparing for a possible return from Harry? Or is he reminding himself what happens when a royal becomes a risk? Whatever the reason, he didn't go alone. He brought someone with him, a name we weren't expecting, Kate. And what she said in that room, in front of that dusty archive folder, might just explain why Meghan Markle hasn't spoken a word yet. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. If a royal decision falls in the palace and no one hears it, does it still shake the kingdom? Because that's exactly what the monarchy hoped for. That no one would find out. That the midnight directive. King Charles's chilling move to strike Prince Harry, Archie, and Lilibet from the line of succession would remain buried in legal obscurity, bound in red ribbon, locked behind brass doors. No press coverage. No scandal. No scrutiny. Just silence. But in the age of leaks, whispers, and encrypted DMs, secrets don't stay secret. Not even in Buckingham Palace. And the document? It didn't just leak. It detonated. Let's start with what the palace wanted you to believe. A reaffirmation of royal structure. A routine legal clarification. A symbolic modernization effort. All of these phrases were being floated internally, ready to be dispatched by press secretaries in the event of exposure. These were the phrases drafted to cover the truth. To shield the monarchy from backlash. To bury the real headline. King Charles quietly removes son and grandchildren from line of succession without public disclosure. Because that's a constitutional earthquake. And it's exactly what the palace was trying to prevent. So what was in the document exactly? Let's break it down, line by line, leak by leak. This was no slapdash memo. It was a legally binding instrument, drafted by the Lord Chancellor in cooperation with the Privy Council Office and delivered under code name Operation Stability. Yes, they gave it a code name. That's how serious it was. Inside the document, Clause 1 reaffirms Charles as sovereign head of state, with discretionary authority under the royal prerogative to recommend amendments to the succession line in matters deemed vital to crown preservation. Clause 2 cites historical precedents. Edward VIII, 1936. It uses his abdication as a legal model for preemptive removal. Clause 3 states, in consideration of prolonged separation from active royal duties, sustained violation of institutional protocol, and continued media-based conflict deleterious to royal reputation, the Duke of Sussex, Master Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor, and Miss Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor shall be excised from formal succession as recognized by this sovereign act. Clause 4, and this is the chilling one, specifies that no public announcement shall be made unless circumstances render disclosure mandatory. They plan to hide it indefinitely. No press release, no public record, no mention in the court circular. So how did it get out? Here's where the plot thickens. 3 days after the signing, a staff member from the Privy Seal office reportedly sent a classified document to a friend, someone working at a small, private legal journal in Edinburgh. The sender claimed it was a routine royal update worth archiving. But that friend? They weren't just a clerk. They were a freelance contributor to a European transparency watchdog group. Within hours, word reached an investigative journalist known for royal leaks, a figure known online only by the alias Brasky. Brasky ran it through multiple verification channels. Watermarks matched. Seals were authentic. The language was irrefutable. They had the real thing. And within 48 hours, it was uploaded, in fragments, to a hidden section of a well-trafficked European political blog, not front and center, just floating in the shadows, waiting to be noticed. And when it finally was, all hell broke loose. Here's what the palace did next. First, they denied everything. Officially, Clarence House released a carefully worded statement. His Majesty the King remains committed to unity and forward movement within the family. Rumors regarding legal alterations to succession are categorically speculative and do not warrant formal comment. A non-denial denial. Classic royal strategy. But behind the scenes? Chaos. Emergency calls. Legal threats. Digital takedown requests. They tried scrubbing the fragments from the internet. But the document was already in the bloodstream. Too late. Screenshots were everywhere. Telegram groups lit up. Royal forums buzzed. And then came the mainstream press. The Times of London ran the headline. Succession suspicion. Is Charles cutting out Harry and his heirs? The Guardian followed with, secret directive may have shifted monarchy without the public knowing. Suddenly, everyone was asking, what is the monarchy hiding? And that's when an anonymous source came forward. This was the final blow. A former palace staffer, known only as C, submitted a sworn affidavit to a major UK newspaper, confirming the existence of the document and the specific timing of its signing. The affidavit read, on the evening of December 14, 2025, I personally observed His Majesty sign a document entitled Sovereign Directive on the Clarification and Reordering of Succession in the Interests of Crown Continuity. This directive was signed without the presence of either Prince William or the Duke of Sussex. Its intention was made clear through verbal instruction and written language. The removal of Harry, Archie, and Lilibet from the official line of succession. That was it. The document was real. And now, the backlash. Social media erupted. Hashtag royal erasure. Hashtag not my king. Hashtag justice for Lilibet. The public was divided. Some praised Charles for restoring dignity and order. Others were horrified. Erasing a son is not leadership, one post read. It's betrayal in its most royal form. In Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, 3 key Commonwealth realms, politicians began demanding transparency on how this affects their symbolic heads of state. One member of parliament in New Zealand said, if this document is authentic, then our constitutional identity is being altered without representation or consent. So what happens now? The document, once hidden, is now public record, unofficially. The palace still won't confirm it, but they can't deny it either. The silence speaks louder than words. And Harry? He saw the leak. He read the news. And within 12 hours, he responded. A private source close to Harry leaked a line from a note he allegedly wrote to his father. I would have respected a conversation. What I can't respect is a knife in the dark. And that note? It wasn't the only one. Because Harry also sent a legal inquiry, not to Buckingham Palace, but to Parliament itself, requesting a formal disclosure of any alterations to the line of succession that affect constitutional roles across the Commonwealth. He went around his father, and straight to the people. Because if the monarchy won't be transparent, Harry will force it to be. But there's one final twist in this chapter. A second document exists. Sources say an amendment, signed by Charles and co-signed by Camilla, contains an additional clause, one that could impact Harry's royal patronages, his military titles, his ability to represent the crown in any formal setting ever again. And that document? It hasn't leaked yet, but insiders say it's worse than the first. Because while the initial directive cut Harry out of succession, the second cuts him out of history. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just vanished into the hallway. That's how one insider described Meghan Markle's reaction when Prince Harry showed her the document. The very one that erased their children from royal history. No explosive meltdown. No flurry of phone calls. Not even a single word. Just 5 seconds of silence. One long look at the page. And a quiet, measured exit from the room. But what happened behind that door? What was she thinking? And more importantly, what did she plan? Because when Meghan Markle goes silent, it's never out of shock. It's strategy. Let's rewind to that moment. The courier had arrived at their Montecito estate just before noon. No fanfare. No guards. Just an unmarked envelope sealed in wax. At first, Harry thought it was a letter from Charles. Maybe a truce. Maybe anything but what it really was. Meghan was in the kitchen with Archie and Lilibet. It was supposed to be a normal California afternoon. But then Harry read it. And his world flipped. We've already covered his reaction. The pacing, the shouting, the refusal to believe. But when he handed the document to Meghan, the air in the room dropped 20 degrees. She scanned it, paused, and said nothing. Then she walked away, taking the document with her. Inside their private office, Meghan locked the door. She sat at her desk, lit only by natural sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. On the desk, a legal pad, a Montblanc pen, and her laptop. For nearly 2 hours, she didn't emerge. No music, no footsteps, just silence. But later, when Harry knocked, she finally opened the door and said something that would haunt him. They've made their move. Now it's time we make ours. What did she mean? Let's unpack it. Because behind that calm exterior was a storm fueled by betrayal, fear, and vengeance. Meghan's relationship with the royal family was never simple. From day one, she was the outsider. American, biracial, divorced. An actress, independent, unapologetic. All qualities that clashed with an institution built on centuries of stoic conformity. She wasn't just a breath of fresh air. She was a hurricane in a tiara. And for a time, the world loved it. But inside those palace walls, she was seen as dangerous. Too direct, too emotional, too visible. So when Meghan left the UK with Harry in 2020, it wasn't just a relocation. It was an escape. And yet, despite everything, she never expected this. Not the erasure. Not of her children. Why was Meghan's name never in the directive? Because it didn't need to be. The royal family had already made it clear she wasn't one of them. They didn't need to strip her of titles. She'd already walked away from them. But her children? They were born royal. Archie, born in the UK. Lilibet, named after the late Queen. Their blood was Windsor. Their destiny tied, by law, to the crown. Until now. The directive that Charles signed cut them out completely. No HRH. No titles. No succession rights. No security. For Meghan, it wasn't just cruel. It was personal. And she wasn't about to let it go. That same night, Meghan placed 3 calls. Not to the palace. Not to friends. But to her legal team, her media consultant, and a top American publicist with ties to Netflix and Apple. Because if the Crown wanted to play the quiet game, Meghan would go loud. What's important here is what she didn't do. She didn't run to the press. She didn't tweet. She didn't release a statement. She didn't book an Oprah special, yet. Because Meghan understands something the royals always underestimated. Silence isn't weakness. It's power. Then came the ultimatum. Sources close to the Sussexes say Meghan drafted a confidential legal inquiry, not addressed to King Charles or William, but to the Commonwealth Secretariat and UK Parliament. In it, she demanded full disclosure of any documents affecting her children's constitutional rights, legal clarification on title removal without notification, confirmation of whether the directive holds legal weight outside of the UK. In short, she's challenging the Crown on legal grounds. This isn't about getting titles back. It's about forcing the monarchy to admit what it did, to put it in writing. And if they don't, she'll go public. And not just through press, through international legal channels, through human rights organizations, through platforms the palace cannot control. But Meghan didn't stop there, because the real blow came from what she began preparing in the days after. A memoir. Yes, you heard that right. Not Harry's. Hers. Working title? Allegedly, The Other Side of the Crown. Sources say she's already begun outlining the chapters, with input from friends, insiders, and personal emails. And if it sees the light of day, it could destroy what's left of the palace's carefully curated narrative. Remember, Meghan has receipts, texts, emails, voicemails, private messages, behind-the-scenes footage from their time as senior royals. And now, she has motivation. They came for her children. Now she's coming for their image. But will she go through with it? That's the million-dollar question. Because Meghan also knows the cost. Going to war with the monarchy isn't just about headlines. It's about safety, scrutiny, stress. It means putting her family back under the microscope. And that's where the contradiction lies. On one hand, she wants to protect Archie and Lilibet from royal intrusion. On the other, she must defend them from being erased. She's caught in the crossfire. And for a mother, that's the most agonizing position of all. What about Harry? Insiders say he was stunned by how composed Meghan was. He expected tears, panic, despair. Instead, she gave him strategy, structure, a plan. But he's torn. While Meghan sees this as a legal and moral war, Harry still sees it as a family issue. He wants answers. He wants accountability. But part of him still wants a reconciliation. Meghan? She's past that. In her eyes, this wasn't a family decision. It was an institutional attack. And she's treating it as such. Then came the letter. A quiet bombshell. Meghan is said to have written a private note to Princess Anne. Yes, Charles's sister. Why her? Because Anne is known as the family's iron wall. No nonsense. No games. Respected, even by Meghan. The contents of the letter haven't been made public, but one line allegedly read, "If there is still honor in this house, then the children of Diana's son deserve at least an answer," and has not responded, at least not publicly. But royal watchers noted she abruptly canceled an engagement 2 days after receiving the note. Coincidence? Or something brewing behind palace gates? And what about Catherine, Princess of Wales? Here's where things get icy. Catherine has remained publicly silent since the directive leaked. But Meghan? She hasn't forgotten their tension. The crying incident before the wedding. The too emotional accusation. The unreturned texts. According to insiders, Meghan has a chapter in her memoir dedicated to their fractured relationship, titled The Ice Rose. And according to one source, that chapter is unfiltered, unedited, and extremely personal. Could it be damaging? Could it reignite a war between two royal wives? Absolutely. But Meghan's position is clear. If they want to define my children's legacy behind closed doors, I will tell the world what they're afraid to say out loud. But Meghan's most dangerous weapon isn't what she's already done. It's what she's capable of doing next. Because rumors are swirling that she's considering something never done before. A formal petition to the United Nations. Yes. An international tribunal on children's rights within constitutional monarchies. That would be a nuclear option. Not just for Britain, but for every royal system around the globe. And if Meghan pushes that button, there's no going back. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. How do you tell your child they've been erased from history before they even had a chance to write their name in it. That's the heartbreaking reality Prince Harry and Meghan Markle now face. Because Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, two young children who were once whispered about as the next generation of modern royalty, have now been officially cut from the royal line of succession. No ceremony, no warning, no public explanation, just a sealed directive, a wax stamp, and a void where their legacy once stood. But what does this actually mean for them? Not symbolically, legally, emotionally, culturally, forever. Let's break it down. First, the legal fallout. Under the old system, Archie and Lilibet were technically entitled to royal titles and positions once their grandfather ascended the throne. Even though Harry and Meghan had stepped back from royal duties, the law was clear. All male-line grandchildren of the sovereign are entitled to the style and dignity of his or her royal highness. That changed the moment Charles became king. For a moment, however brief, Archie and Lilibet were HRH by birthright. Then came the directive. That right was revoked. Their legal connection to the crown? Terminated. No HRH. No titles. No place in the line. No access to crown estates or ceremonial functions. No taxpayer-funded protection in the UK. They are now private citizens. By name. By law. By decree. But here's the twist. They're still royal by blood. That contradiction alone will follow them for the rest of their lives. Born into a system that both defines them and denies them. Now, the emotional fallout. Children don't understand politics. They don't care about press statements or succession charts. They care about identity, belonging, being loved, protected, celebrated. So how do Meghan and Harry explain this? That the family they were born into decided they no longer count? That their names were removed from something older than any of them? Insiders say Meghan cried the night she tried to prepare a child-appropriate version of the truth. She couldn't do it. Harry couldn't either. Because how do you tell your daughter she was named after a queen, but will never be treated like one? How do you explain to Archie that the castle he saw on television once belonged to his grandmother, but that the people inside don't want him around? The trauma of that erasure, the invisibility, will last longer than any scandal. But what about protection? This is where things get even more serious. Archie and Lilibet are now formally unrecognized as working royals or potential heirs. That means no UK security. Not at airports. Not at events. Not even during royal funerals or weddings. And while Harry still pays for private protection in the US, his legal battle to receive UK-funded security for his family while visiting British soil just got harder. Because now, they're not just non-working royals. They're non-royals. A father's worst nightmare has come true. His children have royal blood, but no royal protection, and that leaves them vulnerable. To the press, to stalkers, to threats. Harry's fears, first voiced after Diana's death, are now amplified. He's watching his children live in the same shadow that haunted him as a child. Only now, there's no institutional safety net. Let's talk about the public reaction. The world has watched Archie and Lilibet grow up in rare glimpses, holiday photos, birthday snapshots, brief mentions in interviews. They were never the center of attention, but they were never forgotten. And now, they've become symbols of innocence, of consequence, of what happens when adults play power games and children pay the price. Public outrage surged on social media. Why punish babies for their parents' choices? They didn't ask to be royal, but now they're being punished for it. Even British citizens, typically pro-monarchy, found themselves uncomfortable. Whatever your view on Meghan and Harry, one London radio host said, there's something deeply wrong about erasing a child's history without even telling them why. And what about their futures? Archie and Lilibet now face a forked road. They live a private life, shielded from royal expectation, forging their own identities in the US, perhaps unaware or unbothered by what they lost. Or they grow up curious, resentful, and determined to reclaim what was taken from them. Will Archie one day write a memoir of his own? Will Lilibet seek answers from the institution that denied her a crown but still shaped her name? That depends on what happens next. Because right now, their story isn't theirs. It's a story written for them. In silence. In secret. In red ink. Meghan is already planning a counter-narrative. According to reports, Meghan has begun building a children's legacy project, an educational nonprofit under the Archewell Foundation that aims to support global leadership and heritage exploration for displaced and overlooked children. And you better believe it's personal. Some insiders say Meghan wants to create an alternative royal legacy for her children, one not tied to crowns and titles, but to action, education, and global awareness. She doesn't want them to grow up bitter. She wants them to grow up bigger than the institution that turned its back on them. But here's the quiet pain underneath all of this. Archie and Lilibet never got to meet the full family. They've had limited contact with Charles, minimal interaction with William's kids, and now they've been formally severed from them. There won't be royal playdates. There won't be invitations to Trooping the Color. There won't be framed photos at Buckingham Palace. They'll be raised knowing they are royal, but not welcome. And that sense of exile, it shapes people. It changes how you see the world, especially when the world knows your name, but not your story. Let's not ignore the irony. The monarchy removed Archie and Lilibet to preserve its stability, to tighten the line, to avoid future confusion. But in doing so, they've created the exact opposite. They've invited public scrutiny, legal questions, emotional warfare, and a new generation of exiled royals who didn't choose this. And the longer the silence continues, the louder the questions grow. So what happens next? Harry and Meghan are at a crossroads. Do they fight back with legal firepower? Do they move on and focus on privacy? Or do they build something that rivals the very institution that rejected them? Because one thing is certain, Archie and Lilibet will grow up. They will ask questions. They will Google themselves. They will read articles. They will see the headlines. King erases grandchildren from succession. Charles strips Meghan and Harry's kids of royal future. Crown cuts blood ties. And when they do, what will they think? What will they feel? And what will they say? The crown may have silenced them today, but one day, they will speak. And what comes out of their mouths might just change everything. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the decision to cut Harry, Archie, and Lilibet from the line of succession wasn't just personal, but strategic? What if it wasn't just about the drama with Meghan, or the Netflix deal, or the tell-all memoir? What if it was about something far more dangerous, something hidden from the public eye, buried deep in intelligence briefings, locked in secure rooms beneath Whitehall? Because here's the chilling truth. According to multiple leaks from government sources, a classified intelligence report delivered to King Charles in the weeks leading up to the royal succession directive may have played a decisive role in what happened next. A report that labeled Harry a risk. Let's go back. In the final months of 2025, the UK was dealing with a quiet storm. No, not war, not terrorism, not financial collapse. Something more subtle, more insidious. A growing threat to the institution of the monarchy itself. Public trust was slipping. Polling showed an all-time low in royal approval among Gen Z and millennials. Republican sentiments were on the rise in Australia and the Caribbean. And at the center of it all, the Sussex brand. Every interview, every podcast, every scripted drama about their experience. Every media appearance that made the monarchy look like a cold, outdated machine. But it wasn't just PR. It became a national security concern. Enter MI5. Yes, the UK's domestic counterintelligence agency. While the tabloids chase palace gossip, MI5 monitors something else. Institutional stability. If a family feud becomes a constitutional crisis, they step in. And in late October 2025, King Charles received an urgent preliminary brief from MI5's Royal Protocol Division. It was marked Level 5, Internal Destabilization Risk. And the name at the top? Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. Here's what the memo allegedly contained. A risk matrix assessing the influence of the Sussexes on UK public sentiment. Warnings about increased cyber attacks and deepfake threats exploiting royal divisions. A red flag about foreign entities attempting to reach out to Harry and Meghan under the guise of media partnerships and philanthropy. Evidence of leaked internal communication between a royal aide and a US-based media company planning a dramatized series featuring fictionalized palace scandals, loosely based on real events. An analysis concluding that continued inclusion of the Sussex children in the line of succession, despite geographic and constitutional separation, could one day create a disputed claim, especially if the monarchy weakens post-Charles. The final paragraph reportedly read, "Recommend immediate clarification of succession protocol. remove ambiguity, reinforce chain of continuity. Time-sensitive. Charles was stunned, but not unprepared, because, according to one insider, this wasn't the first time he had seen the words Harry and institutional risk in the same sentence. Back in 2021, when the Oprah interview aired, MI5 had issued a soft advisory, but didn't act on it. Back then, Elizabeth was still queen. The monarchy was strong. But now, the crown sat on Charles's head, and with it, the burden. He couldn't risk a split monarchy. He couldn't risk a constitutional loophole, wherein Harry's children, living abroad, outside royal oversight, might one day be pulled into a crisis of legitimacy. So Charles asked for a second report, this time from MI6, the UK's Foreign Intelligence Service. And what they found sent the palace into panic mode. MI6 flagged a disturbing trend. Multiple foreign power brokers, businessmen with ties to hostile regimes, had expressed interest in cultivating soft influence relationships with Harry and Meghan. At least one high-level executive with links to Chinese state media had reached out to Archewell under the guise of co-sponsoring a global peace documentary. A Russian oligarch, blacklisted by the UK government, was reported to have made a private donation offer to one of Meghan's upcoming children's foundations. While none of these deals materialized, the pattern was clear. Foreign powers saw Harry and Meghan as an opportunity, not because of who they are, but because of what they represent. A living, breathing counter-narrative to the crown. A symbol of royal vulnerability. That was the final straw. When Charles read both memos, one domestic, one international, he convened a secret meeting at St. James's Palace. Present in the room were the Lord Chamberlain, the Keeper of the Privy Seal, two MI5 advisors, the Prime Minister's private secretary. Not even William was in the room for this part. This was a state-level briefing, not a family conference. And at the end of it, Charles turned to his legal counsel and said, "We must act. Quietly. Without spectacle. The line must be secured. There will be no ambiguity after I'm gone." Within 24 hours, the directive was drafted. So was it about betrayal? Yes, but not just personal betrayal. It was potential institutional exposure. If Harry continued building power, media presence, and soft diplomatic influence from outside the system, while still maintaining royal bloodline rights, that would be a constitutional time bomb. Imagine a world in 10 years. King William on the throne, Prince George preparing to step into history, and suddenly, Archie, grown up, appears with a podcast, a platform, a political campaign, still in the line of succession, still, technically, a fallback heir. Even worse, if foreign powers used him to challenge the monarchy's legitimacy in Commonwealth countries. Charles couldn't risk it. So he did the unthinkable. He removed his son and his grandchildren to save the monarchy, or so he believed. But here's the contradiction. In trying to protect the institution from exposure, he exposed its deepest secret. The monarchy isn't just ceremonial anymore. It's strategic, political, even weaponized. And when it feels threatened, it doesn't just defend itself. It strikes. And now the world knows that behind the smiling balcony waves and gilded thrones is a system deeply entangled with intelligence briefings, national risk assessments, and global influence calculations. This wasn't a family decision. This was a national security maneuver, wrapped in tradition, sealed with a crown, executed with ice-cold efficiency. But is it legal? That's the question now echoing through Parliament. Because if royal blood can be cut out with a pen, what stops the monarchy from doing the same to others? To anyone deemed destabilizing? And here's where things get dangerous. Because Harry's legal team has seen the memo, someone leaked a version of the MI5 document to his U.S. attorneys. And Harry? He's furious. Not just because of the content, but because the intelligence community used his family as justification for erasure. And that leads us to the next chapter. Because Harry isn't going to war with Charles anymore. He's going to war with the system. And what comes next might just turn the monarchy's deepest secrets into public record. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It wasn't scheduled. It wasn't polite. It wasn't royal. When Prince Harry called King Charles after learning about the secret document that erased him and his children from the royal line of succession, it wasn't a dignified exchange between sovereign and son. It was raw. It was angry. It was historic. And above all, It was the final nail in a father-son relationship already hanging by a thread. Because for years, they'd avoided the hard conversations, dodged the blame, smiled for the cameras, and said the right things. But this time, there was no PR buffer, no royal handler to mute the fury. It was just Charles and his youngest son finally reaching a breaking point. The call came just before midnight, UK time. Charles was in the green drawing room at Clarence's house, sipping his usual herbal tea, reportedly revising notes for an upcoming engagement. His aide, Michael Fawcett, approached hesitantly. "Your Majesty, it's the Duke of Sussex." Line 1. "He says it's urgent." Charles didn't even look up. "Tell him I'm unavailable." But then, a second call came. This time, from Meghan's phone. Blocked. Ignored. Then a third, Harry again, followed by a voice message. "You don't get to do this and stay silent. Answer." The phone. And against his better judgment, Charles picked up. Harry didn't greet his father. He didn't ask how he was doing. He didn't start with questions. He started with a statement. "You signed their names away like they were property." Charles, reportedly startled by the venom in his son's voice, responded with diplomatic calm. "I understand you're upset." But Harry cut him off. "Upset? You used a piece of paper to erase your own blood. You didn't even call. Not even to explain." Charles sighed. The silence stretched. And then, carefully, "You must understand, this wasn't easy. It wasn't personal." "It wasn't personal?" Harry shot back. "You removed your grandson from the history books. You stripped Lily of her birthright before she could even talk." Charles, ever the politician, remained composed. But his words betrayed him. "The monarchy must endure, Harold, even if that means difficult decisions." That's when Harry lost it. Eyewitnesses. Meghan, one of their house staff, report hearing him shout loud enough for his voice to carry through the hallway. "You talk about the monarchy like it's more important than your family. Like it's a pet you have to keep alive, even if it eats your children." Charles reportedly responded with a bitter truth. "I am not just a father. I am the king, and kings must think of legacy." Harry's voice cracked. He didn't scream this time. He whispered, "And what about my legacy then?" Charles didn't answer, and that silence was louder than anything he could have said. Let's pause here, because this wasn't just a fight between father and son. This was a collision of two worldviews. Charles sees monarchy as eternal. Order, stability, public image. Harry sees monarchy as hollow, without humanity, transparency, family. And that's why this phone call wasn't just emotional. It was existential. It exposed the core fracture in the royal family. Not just between two people. Between two ideas. 1. Preserve the crown, no matter the cost. 2. Protect the people you love, even if it means destroying the crown. But back to the call. After a long pause, Charles reportedly said, "This doesn't have to be the end. I haven't stopped loving you, Harry." And Harry, bitterly, "You have a strange way of showing it." Then came the moment that froze the line. Harry's voice dropped. "You've erased me. Erased Archie. Erased Lily. But you haven't erased the truth. And if the palace won't tell it, I will." That was the warning. Not a threat. Not a PR stunt. A promise. And Charles knew it. Because what Harry said next was a line that reportedly made the king grip the phone so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "If you think a signed document ends this, then you've forgotten everything Mum taught us." Boom. The name that still haunts the House of Windsor. Diana. Let's talk about that. Because Diana's memory is the phantom in every royal room. And when Harry invoked her name, he wasn't being theatrical. He was being strategic. Because deep down, Harry believes his mother would have stood by him. That she would have protected her grandchildren from being cast out. That she would have faced down the monarchy, even as it consumed her. By saying her name, Harry wasn't just appealing to sentiment. He was reminding Charles of his deepest failure. That he couldn't protect her. That now, he was doing the same to her son. And Charles? He had no answer. The call ended badly. Very badly. According to reports,